San Francisco and Oakland, 1964. Bruce Lee is in his early 20s, several years away from movie stardom, running a small kung fu school out of a modest space in Oakland, California. He's not famous yet. He's not the Bruce Lee the world would come to know. He's a young immigrant martial artist trying to build a life and a reputation in America. But he's already doing something that makes the local martial arts establishment uneasy. He's teaching kung fu, specifically Wing Chun, to anyone willing to pay and put in the work. That includes white students, black students, and anyone else who walks through his door. To understand why that was controversial, you have to understand the world Bruce was operating in. For generations, traditional Chinese martial arts were treated as closely guarded cultural property, passed down within specific lineages, often kept within the Chinese community itself. Teaching outsiders wasn't just unconventional, to many traditionalists, it bordered on betrayal. San Francisco's Chinatown, just across the bay, was home to an established and tightly knit martial arts community, with its own hierarchies, masters, and unwritten rules. Bruce, brash and confident even at a young age, didn't seem particularly concerned with asking permission. That tension came to a head when a martial artist named Wong arrived at Bruce's school. The exact nature of the visit depends on who's telling the story. Some accounts describe it as a formal challenge, a test of skill between two martial artists. Other versions, including ones tied to the Chinatown community, frame it more as a warning being delivered: stop teaching outsiders, or be prepared to defend that choice in combat. Whatever the precise framing, the outcome was the same. Bruce agreed to fight on the spot, inside his own school. There was no large audience, no press, no scoring system, just a handful of witnesses, most of them Bruce's own students. What actually happened once the two men squared off is where the story splits into two completely different narratives, and it's worth understanding both, because neither side ever backed down from their version for the rest of their lives. This wasn't a publicized event. There was no footage. Just memory, loyalty, and two very different accounts of the same few minutes inside a quiet training hall in Oakland. According to Linda Lee Cadwell, Bruce's wife, the fight was quick and one-sided. In her recollection, Wong was put on the defensive almost immediately, retreating around the room as Bruce pressed forward, and the fight was effectively over within a few minutes, a clear, decisive win for Bruce. Wong account, which he maintained publicly for decades, paints a very different picture. He claimed the two men had agreed to informal rules beforehand: no strikes to the eyes, no strikes to the groin, and that the fight went on for closer to 20 minutes. In his telling, it ended not because he was defeated, but because both men were simply exhausted, and one of Bruce's training partners stepped in to call a stop to it. Two completely different stories. Two men who never reconciled their versions of events, even years later. Martial arts historians still argue about it today, picking apart second-hand accounts, interviews, and the few people who were actually in the room, trying to figure out which version comes closest to the truth. Here's where it gets interesting. Strip away the disagreements about who won, how long it lasted, and what rules were or weren't in place, and there's one detail that shows up in nearly every retelling, from both camps. Bruce could not finish the fight quickly. Wong by most accounts, didn't fight the way Bruce expected. Rather than standing and trading close-range exchanges, exactly the kind of fighting where Bruce's Wing Chun training excelled, Wong kept retreating, circling, and resetting distance every time Bruce closed in. It sounds almost comical when you describe it: one of the most dangerous close-range fighters in California, reduced to chasing an opponent around a small room. But that's apparently exactly what happened. And chasing a moving target, throwing punches that connect with air more often than not, is exhausting, physically and mentally, even for someone in elite condition. Whatever the final outcome was, the fight didn't unfold the way Bruce had clearly expected it to going in. This is the part of the story that actually matters for understanding who Bruce Lee became. By his own account, repeated over the following years to people close to him, Bruce didn't walk away from that fight feeling triumphant. He walked away feeling exposed. Not because he lost, most accounts, including his own, suggest he ultimately got the better of the exchange. What bothered him was how it happened. He felt that his classical training, built on fixed stances, prescribed forms, and techniques drilled the same way thousands of times, hadn't given him the tools to finish a fight efficiently against an opponent who simply refused to engage on his terms. For a martial artist who had spent his entire life inside structured systems, that was an uncomfortable realization. Traditional kung fu had taught him what to do. It hadn't necessarily taught him how to adapt when an opponent didn't cooperate with the expected pattern. That gap between training and reality stayed with him long after the fight itself was over. In the months following the fight, something shifted in how Bruce approached martial arts entirely. He began questioning the rigid structure of classical kung fu, the fixed stances, the prescribed sequences of forms, the idea that a single style could contain everything a fighter needed. He started looking outside Chinese martial arts traditions altogether, studying boxing footwork for its mobility, fencing for its precise understanding of distance and timing, and modern strength and conditioning methods that weren't part of traditional kung fu training at all. This wasn't an overnight transformation. It was the beginning of a years-long process of breaking down and rebuilding his entire approach to combat, one that eventually led him to develop his own system, built around the idea that rigid styles limit a fighter, and that efficiency and adaptability matter more than tradition for its own sake. That system would later become known as Jeet Kune Do, a philosophy that would go on to influence martial arts and combat sports for decades after his death. It's worth sitting with how strange this is. A relatively obscure, undocumented fight in a small Oakland kung fu school, with no formal record, no video footage, and two witnesses who couldn't even agree on how long it lasted, ended up reshaping the philosophy of one of the most influential martial artists in history. There's no surviving footage. No official referee's account. Just two competing memories, and one shared outcome, a young martial artist who came away convinced that the traditional path wasn't enough. Whether you believe Linda Lee Cadwell's version of a quick, decisive victory, or Wong Jack Man's account of a longer, inconclusive struggle, the historical significance lands in the same place. This wasn't just a backstreet dispute between two martial artists with a cultural disagreement. By most accounts from people who knew him, it was the spark that sent Bruce Lee down the path toward Jeet Kune Do, and, ultimately, toward becoming the figure who'd go on to reshape martial arts on a global scale.